Putin has never listened to one single reasonable debate. He went, he did, he's killed hundreds of thousands on his own side and on the Ukrainian side. So we have to have a proper deterrent.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Off to the Falklands now. At least the Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron is in what's been described as a high-profile demonstration that the Falklands are a valued part of the British family. It comes amid Argentinian calls for negotiations on their future. He's the first cabinet minister to visit the Falkland Islands since 2016. Well, let's speak to a veteran of the Falklands War, Simon Weston, who joins me now. Morning, Simon.
Good morning.
I remember actually being at Tory conference back in October. The then Foreign Secretary James Cleverly said he was going to go to the Falklands to demonstrate that they were very important to the Conservative government. They were only safe, I think, with the Conservative government, as he said. How serious is this moment, do you think, for the Falklands and the Argentina again calling for negotiations about their future?
I just don't think that it's ever changed. Whoever is in charge of Argentina is calling for some sort of negotiation all the time, and that's been a consistent threat and worry to the islanders because it unsettles their lives. But you know, the fact that we keep going on about something that they can't justify their claim, they can't prove their claim, they've never owned the islands. We have idiots saying we should give it back. I wish people would stop saying give it back. How can you give something back that nobody ever owned? You know, they keep on about these things. The problem is the islands are very well heeled. They are living their own life. They are very constructive. They have a great economy. Argentina, on the other hand, has a desperate economy. 200% raging inflation. And as I remember, almost 42 years ago, that's the reason why Galtieri sent their forces there, because of the raging inflation and the problems they had in their country. Whether they're going there after oil, because in reality, we're never going to get away from fossil fuel. We're never going to get away from oil. It's impossible. So, you know, there is going to be a big market for oil at some point, because we'll go past the 10-year point and every other important issue will change. And this is what the Argentinians are probably banking on. But this guy, they're just banging the same old drum. I wish they would leave the islanders alone to get on. They have a very successful economy. The Argentinians don't. They've never owned the islands. And it's absolutely critical that Lord Cameron goes there and restates the British support to the islanders. But, you know, we're going to need to improve our military capability as well. There's other big glaring issues that need to be discussed about how we invest in our military and how we recruit greater numbers into our military so that we have the capability if they decide to ramp up their military. At the moment, they couldn't mount an assault on a scout camp because they just don't have the military or the Navy or the Air Force to do it. But at the moment, in time, in future, if this guy does continue with his rhetoric, then maybe they might ramp up their capability. But it's very, very important that Lord Cameron sticks by his guns and supports the islands correctly.
You talk about the state of the Argentinian military. What do you make of the British military? Were a repeat of what happened 42 years ago to happen again? Would Britain be in a position to defend them in the same way, do you think?
We wouldn't have to, because we already have people down there at the moment. Yeah. Some of my regiment are down there. We have fighter aircraft down there. We have helicopters. We have a naval vessel based there permanently. So we already are better strategically than they are. And we also have knowledge of the islands in a way that they don't. But the problem still remains, as you quite rightly point out. Could we do it again? No. The answer is simply no. We don't have the men and women in the British Armed Forces to be able to go and do it, unfortunately. Because the problem with politicians is they always seek out a thing called a peace dividend. And the peace dividend is a downsizing of the military and downsizing of the spend.
Yeah.
And pro rata, we aren't spending enough and we aren't ramping our armed forces up to be able to support the rest of the world in our commitment levels that we've made. And we need to be able to do that. We need to have a proper armed forces. 70,000, out of that 70,000, maybe 30,000 will be tooth-armed fighters. The rest will be support workers, supporters, from the engineers and such like, who will support vehicles or do minefields or something. But the actual shooting war will take place with Marines, Paras, Guards, Anglians, all those sorts of guys. But there isn't enough of them. The Marines are drastically short. The recruitment is woeful at the moment. And unless we do something about it that changes everything, we will see a real problem if we ever have to go to conflict, because once the professionals are done with, then we have to call on conscripts.
Yeah.
Because the TA is a small unit. It's only about 12,000. So the TA and the regulars, the first people to die in any conflict are the regulars. Then after that, then you've got to rely on the TA. And then after that, you've got to rely on conscripts. And as we've seen with Russia in Ukraine, if you don't have enough well-trained conscripts, the casualty count is absolutely devastating. And, there are lots of people in Russia who never see their sons, fathers, brothers, cousins come home again. And that's all because of the lack of preparation and the lack of proper training and funding for the Russian armed forces. And in some ways, you've got to say thankfully. But for us, we have to concentrate on us. We need to make sure that we have proper funding and proper recruitment into our armed forces. But we can't rely on all the sort of appeasement brigade who will say, oh, well, if we talk to them nicely, that'll work. No, it won't. It'll never work. It never worked in the First World War, never worked in the Second World War. It's never worked in any major conflict escalation. You can't talk to people who are desperate to go and do what they want to do. Putin has never listened to one single reasonable debate. He went, he did, he's killed hundreds of thousands on his own side and on the Ukrainian side. So we have to have a proper deterrent.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Simon, really good to speak to you. Really appreciate your time today. Simon Weston there, veteran, of course, of the Falklands War, but still an expert on what's going on in the world of the military. We'll bring you more, of course, on David Cameron's visit to the Falklands here on Times Radio.